I am Minaa Haroon and I am Assistant Director of Fine Arts at the Alhambra Art Gallery, Lahore Arts Council. I would introduce our three panelists for today's session. First of all, Professor Salima Hashmi. पाकिस्तान में जो भी आर्ट को जानता है या समझता है, ये हो नहीं सकता कि वो प्रोफेसर सलीमा हाशमी को ना जानता हो। वो एक ऐसा दरख्त है जिसने अपनी छाँव में बहुत से आर्टिस्टों को सिखाया है और पढ़ाया है। Professor Salima Hashmi is an artist, art educator, curator, and a writer on art and culture with many publications on her credit. She has taught at the National College of Arts for 30 years and was principal for 4 years. She is founding Dean of Art and Design Department at the Beacon House National University and now is Professor Emeritus and a human rights activist as well. Next speaker we have with us is Charles Moore. A very warm welcome to you, Charles Moore, on the behalf of Lahore Literary Festival and Lahore Arts Council. Charles Moore is a partner of Grosvenor Gallery in London and specializes in modern and contemporary art from South Asia. Formerly a specialist at Bonhams, London, he joined Grosvenor in 2012 and has written many publications on artists such as Chuktai and Sadikan, and had made several significant discoveries in the field. And the third speaker we have with us is Wardha Shabbir. She is a visual practitioner and a contemporary miniaturist. She graduated from the National College of Arts in 2011 with a bachelor's degree in fine arts. In 2016, she participated in the summer intensive program at the Slade School of Fine Arts, London. In addition, Wardha has done numerous group exhibitions that includes at Dhaka Art Summit, Dubai, Abu Dhabi Art Fair, Indian Art Fair, Singapore Biennale, and has done 7 solo exhibitions, which includes gallery like Grosvenor Gallery, Canvas Gallery Karachi, and now at Alhambra Art Gallery. Shabbir was among the finalists of the Jameel Prize. She has been nominated twice for the Sovereign Art Prize. Today we have gathered here to talk about the exhibition titled A Tree Could Wander, a solo exhibition by Wardha Shabbir, which is installed at the Alhambra Art Gallery, curated by Rotas II in collaboration with Lahore Literary Festival. This is one of the first experiential exhibitions that has been installed at the Alhambra Art Gallery since its creation since 1984. Wardha has created these works especially for this exhibition to transform this gallery into another space. This gallery is designed by the renowned architect Mr. Nayyar Ali Dada. The main purpose of this exhibition is to create this exhibition for the local community of Lahore to make them experience two-dimensional miniature painting converting into a three-dimensional experiential environment. Now I would request Mr. Charles to moderate this session and take it forward for our audience who are eager to know more about this exhibition.
Well, thank you very much, Minaa. It's a very nice introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here, sharing this stage with Wardha and Mrs. Hashmi. I'm very honoured to be part of this, and thanks Razzie and the team for organising this wonderful event. If you haven't seen the exhibition, which is installed in the neighbouring gallery, you're in the right place to get a good introduction to Wardha and her practice and the thought process that goes on behind her work. And then, I urge you after this to head straight there and experience the installation, which is really remarkable. And when you enter that space, you have to bear in mind, of course, that it looked exactly like this until 4 days ago. So Wardha and the team have worked extremely hard to put it together, and it really is something very special. So it's very fortunate to be able to see it. We thought what we'd do is we'd give a bit of an introduction to Wardha's practice and some of the themes and subjects that she deals with in her work, and then discuss the exhibition, and then at the end we'll have a little question and answer session if there's time. So Wardha, perhaps you could sort of start us off by looking back at the early days of your career as an artist. I remember in a previous conversation we had that you said that even as a young child you wanted to study at the NCA, and that was always an ambition of yours, and that would sort of give you a freedom from what was quite a straightforward way of thinking about what people should do as a career and how people should progress. So if you could just let us know a bit about how you got started, and we can move forward from there.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much for coming over here and supporting this program. Well, yeah, I think when I was a child and people in school used to ask me, what do you want to become when you grow up? I didn't used to answer that question. I always used to say, मैं तो NCA जाऊँगी. I mean, हमेशा से. I mean, since I remember, I saw my cousin drawing and he made a red car in his drawing book. And I asked him, what is that you study that you're making these drawings? And he told me, I'm in NCA and this is an arts college and everything. And I got so inspired by that that I think my parents knew from the beginning कि इसने NCA ही जाना. Although I'm the first artist in my family and there was a struggle telling them कि this is a field and मैं कुछ कर लूँगी. वो struggle वो सारे थे ही. But I always knew from the beginning कि yes, NCA जाना है and I will go there, and then I started to mark my journey just organically, just like that.
That's probably the optimum word, isn't it? Organically, because as your career progresses, you create what is you term organic geometry, and I think when people see your work, you'll see where that reference comes from. Professor Hashmi as well obviously played a big part in your career at NCA, and then sort of the early days as well. And perhaps you could mention Mrs. Hashmi's involvement and how she's been a mentor to you over the years, and how that has affected you and influenced.
I have to correct you there. I played no part in her career at NCA. I had left long before.
Okay.
But when I came across her work, really, which was from the time that she was graduating, there was something of significance which convinced me that there was an open-ended way of approaching a very rigorous, very traditional way of working. I mean, we know that what NCA does in the miniature department is really gives you a kind of a framework which goes back in history of a way of working and a way of crafting your mark and the surface and the materials that you work with. And then there is the aspect of copying. So you're learning from the masters, rather in the way that if you go to the National Gallery in Britain, you'll see students sitting and they'll be copying the old masters there. So there's all of that. One significant thing that one has noticed, even when I was a young teacher, that miniature painting students normally ignore the fact that there's a Lahore museum next door. And they rarely go and engage with actual miniatures. So that is one thing, and so they're copying from copies, as it were. So that is one aspect of the person, the people who are working there. I think what was very interesting in Wardha's work, which I came across as a young artist, was the fact that there was a lot of curiosity, which is very often numbed when you're working in such a traditional manner. And that was very alive and kicking. So that to me was a reason why, yes, we asked her to have her solo show with us in Rohtas 2. And the show itself, I think, demonstrated the various things that she was working with and the fact that none of them were, inverted commas, finally resolved, which is great as far as I'm concerned for an artist. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I was very lucky to have my first solo show at Rohtas. And by lucky saying, because she, there are very few artists who get a chance to do what they want to at a very early stage. And I was very lucky to do whatever I wanted to at a very, very early stage. Like I did my first step towards experiential installation was at Rohtas that I did. I mean, I'm always inward in the traditional aspects of miniature painting, and I study and I research on that. But I'm also very interested in beyond, what is beyond the 2D miniatures that I'm making, and I have been making for the past 11 years. But what does the paper has to say when I look at the final image? Where does the process takes me? And how important is for me to, jump to different mediums to understand that the traditional, that medium as well. So, I think then I did my first solo show at Rohtas, and then I did my second solo show at Rohtas. At my first solo, I literally covered the whole gallery space with real grass. I mean, who let you do that in a gallery space? But, you know, I have had a very generous support in terms that this is how I, you know, evolved with time and with the practice given to me.
And that experiential nature in your work is sort of all-encompassing. It's because the shows we've had at the gallery in London have been, you know, to be fair, we didn't let you put grass all over the floor, so Mrs. Hashmi has one up on us for that, definitely. But the exhibitions I've seen of yours, you know, you play with colour and you play with positioning and you play with, you know, the way people engage with the works. You know, it's not just presented on a white wall, bang, 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 one next to each other, and then that's it. There is real care and consideration put into the way things are displayed. Oh, and I'll show you a couple of images as well of the Jameel Prize display, which again is very experiential. And the work not only stays within the borders of the frames, you often embellish the walls and you add detailing, which again you'll see in this show. And it's not. I find it's not only the environment, but it's also the titles as well. You know, they end up. Your works have extremely personal titles, which I think plays a big part in how people interpret what they're seeing. Is that the case? Or?
I mean, I think when you work with miniature painting, you spend so much time with that image that you're looking at it every day for hours and hours. And I don't think that if I'm spending so much time with an image, how can I not think about its title? How can I let it go as untitled? I mean, that is beyond my understanding. So when I'm making the process, I mean, the image hold my finger and it actually tells me about the title, but usually my titles come from my spiritual understanding, and I think Rumi has guided me a lot in this regard. Most of the titles are from Rumi or the books that I've read during my journey as a student and as an evolving artist.
And I mean, that's an interesting point you say about how long you spend with these pieces and how long you spend working on a particular work, because I feel they become quite deeply personal things. Naturally, they're a product of you, so there is always yourself in them. But certainly what we experience at the gallery when people come to the show, you know, it's one thing to see an image on a screen or in a book, but suddenly when you're face to face with a painting presented in a slightly surprising manner or in a way that you're not necessarily used to, it throws them off balance a bit. And you know, they often spend a great deal more time engaging with the work, and I think the way you work and the fact that some of the stories and narratives are so deeply personal means that often people see themselves in your work. You know, they can read them as a deeply personal thing. You know, there's a few details here of works which we've shown in the past. You know, perhaps you could just go into a little bit of detail about some of the visual devices that you use in some of your work, because it's complicated. It's
Well, I've spent so much time with this imagery that it's not complicated to me now, but yeah. But I've been born in Lahore, I've been raised in Lahore, and luckily or unluckily, I'm still in Lahore. So, you know, my influences have not changed, they have evolved as I have evolved and grown as a person. And I've been looking at the same trees and the same plants and the same Mall Road for, you know, more than a century now, almost. But, you know, the difference that every day there's a different light, there's a different temperature, there's a different thing that, what are the ways of seeing geography at different times, at different temperatures, in different moods. So my basic influence actually came from the plants which were in my home. We used to live in Model Town, and there were a lot of trees, and my mother always used to tend towards plants. And she is a cleanliness freak, so she actually used to ask me to clean the leaves with the cloth. And that was my first interaction with the cloth, that I was like, Ma, ye karna hai saaf? And she was like, yes, do this. So I started looking at those plants, and then the plants became my foremost influence in that regard. So all the trees that you see in my paintings are the actual foliage of Lahore that has grown with me. And then, because the detail in it comes from my traditional practice of miniature painting, and because my scale is so small that then I try to use these flat fluorescent colors on the backgrounds, only that so I could invite the viewer from the distance, and I can hold their finger and bring them closer to my work. I don't want to give the viewer, most of the time I don't want to give them the choice to think about, there's another story about it. I want them to think, and I want even the titles to be the negotiator between me and the work. And that's the direct interaction that I want. That's why my titles for me are very, very important in that regard as well. But then when you will go and look at the show as well, you will see that they are very small paintings, but I don't like them putting them just on eye level. Even if I'm putting a show where I'm not doing an experiential installation, even then, Charlie would second me that even then I will provoke him to, put my painting in a corner, or just do something over here, or just paint the wall some other color and then just draw on it. Just bring some experience next to it, that, the story does not end inside that frame that we have been making of those modern and traditional aspects. You have to come out of your comfort zone, and you have to provoke yourself to do something new. If your painting has become beautiful to you, that means you're doing something wrong. Then you need to come out of that thing, and then you need to break your circle and do something that you have not done before in that regard. So yes, there are so many small details. Even the weather condition of my city informs me about the things I will pick and then draw. Maybe the day that I was painting this painting, there was a lot of rain falling in Lahore. And this is the only influence that the window of my studio gives me. Like, I'm a mother, I'm a wife as well, so I have a very small bracket to work. I just have 4 hours to concentrate, and then the rest of my day is divided between house chores and my job as a mother, and then my job as a wife, and then tending to family things as well. So those 4 hours, I just have my window to look out, and then when I'm driving, I'm also looking at the city evolving and the light and everything. So these small influences then gather together and become part of my painting. But I don't let myself stop, and I keep on challenging the same visuals that are coming to me in different forms, and it will go on. I'll see where my imagination takes me.
One of the things that comes to mind, and this is over the last few years when I've looked at your work, is that there are several parallels that are going along, because there is that allegiance to a particular kind of working which you described just now. But there's something which is in some ways rather contrary to that. Almost like you want to deny one kind of working and moving into a different realm, which allows you to ruminate, which allows you to go out of the parameters of the work that you just described, the window through which you look out into your studio, and in fact the notion of time, which is something that you constantly push. And some of the work that you have done, which is in video, that looks at notions of time and looks at notions of space and a kind of infinity, which somehow doesn't come through in your other work. So I'm just wondering whether this is something that you explore consciously, how did that come about, that need to do that? And from what I've heard, I haven't seen your show just yet, but I believe that you have explored that also. So that intrigues me in the terms of how you move. And an exhibition that I curated, which was based on the idea of solitude, you explored both of these things, which is, when I first articulated it for myself.
The exhibition that Mrs. Hashmi just spoke about, Solitude, happened in 2018 at Koil Gallery in Karachi, and where I had a small part. It was a group exhibition in which, we were given Faiz Ahmed Faiz poems Tanhai, and we were supposed to, make work on that. And I made a video on that work, which is actually displayed inside the gallery right now. This is the video that you see on the ground floor of this exhibition. Its title is Daira. And yes, it has that sense of time, parallel time, and the infinity that you're talking about, I would actually just call it a loop. I mean, loops are infinite as well. It's just a contemporary term right now that we can use for infinity. That my time is in a loop in this city. My time is like I wake up at 6 a.m. and then I go in a loop. So those loops and those all external factors that make my day and then make me as a person, that matters. And that it just comes together and make you one as a person. And then when you channel that whole thing, then your work starts to get produced about it. But also it's also about, the work is about so many other things, about the spiritual journey as well. It's about me, how I'm growing up and taking different other names rather than just being a girl and just a student. And then, you also tend to question yourself that, okay, I'm this, but what am I in the end? Am I something? So my work is something that keeps me alive. From Wardha Shabbir to Wardha Umair, the Wardha is my work that informs me every day, and that Wardha keeps on telling me that I need to prove myself every day in one way or the other by, provoking and challenging and doing all sort of these things. But I would just like to mention it here that, every painting that I do and every work that I do, not every painting is successful, not every project is successful. For me, failed projects and failed experiments and the process of it is more important than the final imagery that you will actually see over here. I would rather, if I have given another show, I'll rather take the process with me and develop something new. I'm not going to look at the final imagery of the show anymore. So that's how, the loop goes on of infinity.
And you mentioned that the sense of place, and that your work is a product of the city you grew up in. And the first show that we did of yours in London in 2019, that was just after you had your first child, I think, and that was visually very different to subsequent shows and to what had come before, and kind of sits alone as its own body of work. I'm just wondering, you were able to put yourself into a mindset for that London exhibition, and the works were blue. They were all very these works here, they were very, very pale, and you mentioned at the time that it was red, that was how you felt about the London sky, and that the yellow works reference Lahore and the light here. The sense of place obviously is crucial to your work and manifests itself very clearly in what you produce. Do you how do you see this sort of going forward? Do you see it as something that, if you say remained in Lahore, you have to, will those challenges still be there, or is it a constant evolution of your sort of aesthetics, pushing yourself?
I think in regard to this question, the most challenging time for me was the time of COVID, when there was absolutely no traveling, no going out of the house. That was my main challenge. And even when I was with a child and I produced these works before my son, I was so confined to a space, and I was just so eager to break through this body that presence of struggle is so evident in these works. There's an element of growth in these works when you look at that in a free state. That was the title of, again, the title In a Free State defines my mental level of that time in that regard. But yes, because I'm traveling very often now, so the constant struggle breaks. But I'm ready to accept this. If I'm living in Lahore, I'm happy to have this challenge and break it every time I'm making new work. And so far, I think that I have managed it well, but let's see what future brings.
Mrs. Hashmi, how do you think, in, say, the canon of contemporary miniature painting, how do you think Wardha sits? And how do you think her practice sits in that wider scale?
You know, one always hesitates in being rather proclaiming things vis-a-vis artists' practices which evolve as fast as hers, to be very honest. Because I've also in the years, and as you can imagine, I'm a very ancient lady, one has seen artists who arrive at a certain level of success, and then there is a period in which there's so much consolidation actually of what they've done. And the work kind of stops for a while it goes kind of horizontal. There's a certain kind of restlessness in Wardha's practice, I think, of the demands that she makes of herself, which induces, not just for people who observe, but I think also induces for people who are perhaps collecting her work, to wonder as to, okay, so what next? Because I also think, we know you're part of the art market, okay? You know that when you are promoting an artist, there's a certain parameter that you have, and when you talk to people who are wanting to acquire the work, you describe the work. You talk about it. And pretty soon you turn around and you discover that Wardha has gone somewhere else. So to me, that's wonderfully healthy, because I think that here is a person who can turn her back on something that is expected of her and goes into a totally different direction. Which of course means that she needs to keep, it's not just the audience that has to keep up with her, she has to keep up with her audience also. And that's a problem in Pakistan specifically, because we get very little chances to see people's work. They're not the venues, they have hardly any publications. There's Qudus Mirza's work, a weekly column, which tells us what happened in Karachi, and so on. So I think that because that discourse and that comfort with an artist's practice is missing, you're thinking, you might miss something significant, and I felt that about her work, even for myself. So I can imagine that people who are not following as closely as I, they would also possibly meet and miss a certain swerve that she's taken. But I'm happy to say that an artist who's constantly surprising herself and her audience and the critics is precisely why we do this stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, we had Wardha's last show with us was in October last year, and something that took us slightly by surprise was when we unpacked everything, they had these hugely vibrant frames on the works, which is something we never discussed it at the time. We opened them up and we were like, oh my goodness me, this is something that we hadn't, because usually your works are sort of very framed in the same color as the paper and almost to blend into the background. But these came and it was bang, they were really visually striking. This is a good example of one of them, which he then came and embellished, drew the dragonflies on the wall, almost creating a sort of, almost like a living installation. And I know that your framer is not particularly happy with you most of the time, because you're pushing, you're trying to do these different things, you're trying to evolve the practice. Where did this come about? The big bold frames is quite a visual change for you, wasn't from what I was aware of.
I think when I'm given a show, I don't think about the works, I think about the space. I always ask the gallery to first send me the gallery plan. Every time I have a show at Grosvenor, I always ask for them their plan, and then I start looking at the space. And then the space actually, tells me that this is what I can do with the same space, or this is what I can do, something else with it at the same time. And even with the show at Alhambra, that me and Asad Hai, who actually, Rohtas helped me curate this gallery, we had this idea for 2 years. And we didn't know that, where will we do this show? How is it possible that we bring so much experience into one thing? But then Razi gave this opportunity and it just started to happen magically. I don't know how we transformed the gallery in 4 days, guys. Just 4 days were given to me to transform.
There were several heart attacks, I must say, during the course of this installation.
Yeah, there were several heart attacks, yes. And, but I think when I went to Mrs. Hashmi to show off my new paintings right before Grosvenor show, तो मुझे इन्होंने कहा कि ये तो तुम करती रहती हो, इसके आगे क्या करोगी? So that was like, okay, so there's very, very important for you to maybe have someone tell you that, you need to evolve, you need to change your course, you need to, like how I was telling about the challenges and talking about it. So, I mean, there, when she puts a seed in my mind, then it just goes and I keep on thinking that, maybe I can do this or that. So this is exactly where the frame is coming from. When they didn't let me put grass in the gallery, and I had to do something, and I had to surprise my viewer with something, but it's just not the element of surprise that I wanted to bring over here. It's also how I want the viewer to look at my paintings from a distance, because we are we move all the time, we breathe, we are not stagnant. So when you look at the work from a distance, when you come closer, so I always, try to imagine that, when a viewer will be coming from the gallery, how will they look at the work from this angle, from this space, from this space. So this is how the stark color comes, because like I said, I want to hold your finger and bring into my world. I don't want to give you that choice. But also these paintings are coming from, traditionally, from my understanding of what border means to a miniature painting in that regard.
And you mentioned you want to bring people into your world, and once you've done that, and once people have experienced your work in a gallery setting or museum setting or what have you, how do you feel when your paintings leave and go out there into the world and have a new life of their own, in a place you haven't had any influence on at all? Are you okay to let them go? How does that feel?
That's very important. When I put my work in a space, that work is one for me. I never say that I'm making 5 different paintings and please go and see my show. I'll always say that, please, have you seen that work? Even this work is one work for me. Each installation, each work supports each other. So I think that I don't let that thing come to me in a way that one work is getting separated. When one work is out of the installation, it just goes away anyway, So right now, the whole gallery is weaved into one experience, and every time, even if there's an installation or there's no installation, even just there's work, how it's placed, that's one work. What's the strength of it.
And this work to me strikes me as being extremely autobiographical, and again, a very intimate thing, because you're led on a journey, and it is almost like you are walking the pathways of one of your paintings, and you are experiencing changes in volume, changes in light, changes in scent and sound, and eventually you're sort of led to this sort of open space, but you have to walk through a tunnel. I'm not going to, no more spoilers, but yeah, it's a remarkable thing. I mean, perhaps you could just explain a little bit about the show and about the work next door. If a Tree Could Wander, I mean, is that an autobiographical title in itself? Are you the tree? Is that what it is?
I could be. That's for the viewer to, to think. Again, I mean, I would not repeat, the element of space and the importance of space to me when I'm thinking about an exhibition. This is how I actually, came up with these ideas as well. But with this exhibition, I went back to my first lesson when I was taught to put a dot on a piece of paper, while sitting in that traditional manner in the miniature department, taught in a very traditional manner of almost I was an apprentice for 4 years. So when you put a dot, that's how the geometry came to me. And that's how I do research on organic geometry through these works. Not geometry, organic geometry is a whole new different dimension in that regard. When you enter this space of Alhambra, you would actually see a cube. And if you go back to the basic of spirituality and you look at the geometry of this universe, it's actually a cube placed inside a circle. That's the geometry of the universe. That's how you see the most religious, Makkah is actually a cube, and then you circumambulate it, and we living beings are circumambulating it and making it into a circle as well. When you go into this space, you're also looking at a circle, and then you're looking at a video projection, which is a round circular projection, again on solitude and the oneness, and you get to know yourself. When you walk up the stairs, it's like you're, the whole thing, the spirituality, the nirvana is coming. You go around that cube, you do a circumambulation of that space. Then you actually look at the real trees, the real foliage of Lahore. There's an actual garden inside. Why I've taken trees? Because I'm very interested in, again, organic geometry and how a dot opens up into something else. Like a tree is a semicircle from above and a semicircle from below, and it makes a complete circle. So that on top of that cube, then there's an omnipresence of life that defines everything, and there's, other dimensionality of life and death and other things. And then you go into that video installation of a Sirat, and not Sirat-e-Mustaqim, just the Sirat, and then you look at my actual paintings. So yeah, this is how the whole thing is weaved together, and a lot to see and discover.
And I'm wondering how does this now that you've this is a major installation that you've put together. How do you move on? Where do you move on to? How do you incorporate that sort of three-dimensional nature that you've created here? Quite a magical experience. How do you then take that forward into 2D? Into your paintings?
I mean, I'm actually really looking forward to sit in my studio and then see what the magic is going to happen on paper, because this is my foremost experience that, when I take this whole 3D installation, how does that transform into a 2D piece? It also surprises me every time. So even, there's a drawing in my show. It's called Mosaic or Processes. It's one of the drawings that I did while just right after my installation. So it's more free, it's more without borders, it's more, it has all those free elements that I've encountered during making that installation. And I think it's very, very important for me as an artist. I will keep on evolving if I will keep on evolving my mediums. I need to go back and address my one medium, then I need to go back to another and challenge myself, and then come back to another thing. So it's very important for my journey to go on, for me to, expand the practice in many different ways.
I just want to now go and see what happened when a tree wandered.
Everyone, I would like to invite you to the art gallery. There's an opening over there, and please look around and experience the show. Thank you so much for coming.